Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, if you are listening to us right now, maybe you are gearing up for a demanding project or taking a long walk to clear your head.
Or maybe you are just someone who is endlessly fascinated by the human body and mindfulness.
Exactly. You have landed in the perfect place. Today, we are opening up a genuinely remarkable piece of source material.
We really are.
We are looking specifically at Chapter 2 of a highly detailed manual written by Tomita Kaiji.
And this text is entirely focused on the mastery of what he categorizes as ray therapy.
Right. And I want to set expectations right out of the gate here.
Yeah, that is probably a good idea.
Because if you hear the phrase hands-on healing, you probably immediately picture some esoteric, flowy, new age pamphlet.
Incense and crystal bowls.
Yes, but you need to completely discard that image right now. This is not your typical wellness manual.
It is entirely removed from that modern wellness aesthetic, which I think perfectly frames our primary mission for this deep dive.
What is that mission?
Well, when contemporary audiences encounter concepts like emitted vital energy or therapeutic touch, there is this natural, almost reflexive tendency to categorize it as magical thinking.
Right, like superpowers.
Exactly. Superpowers or mystical gifts that are randomly bestowed upon a chosen few by the universe.
We expect promises of instant, miraculous fixes.
We do. And our mission today is to completely dismantle that expectation. We are going to unpack Tomita's actual methodology.
Because what we have in this text is a highly structured, fiercely pragmatic, and honestly almost clinical approach to the human body.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are going to explore how this manual frames the ability to heal. It is not presented as arcane magic at all.
No, it is treated as a rigorous, strictly mechanical byproduct, a step-by-step byproduct of profound personal self-cultivation.
It is the clinical nature of it that is so striking.
It is what caught my attention right away, and we have a very comprehensive roadmap to get through today.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We are going to begin in a place that I guarantee no one expects when opening a book on healing energy.
Macroeconomics.
Yes. We are going to look at the strict economic philosophy that underpins this entire practice.
Which is wild.
From there, we will walk you through a grueling, highly specific, 5-day physical and mental boot camp.
A boot camp required just to even begin feeling this energy.
Right. And after that, we are going to decode the mechanics of how practitioners are actually trained to literally feel disease in another person's body.
Treating their own hands like a biological radar system.
Exactly. And finally, we will unpack the strict ethical framework that governs the therapy.
So let us jump right into that first section.
Yeah, let's do it. The very opening of this chapter starts with a deep, serious discussion about household finances.
And the national debt.
I have to admit, reading that, it felt like a complete left turn.
It really does.
Why does an author writing about energetic healing sit the reader down for a lecture on macroeconomics and personal banking?
It feels jarring to a modern reader, for sure, because we have aggressively compartmentalized our lives.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we keep our health in one box, our finances in another box.
And our spirituality in a third box.
Exactly. But the author fundamentally rejects that separation. He starts with the economics because it grounds the entire practice in sheer, undeniable pragmatism.
So it's not just a philosophical exercise?
Not at all. The text argues a very sobering point. In any given household, and scaling up to any given nation, there are finite, strict limits to income and resources.
Right. Money is not infinite.
Right. So when disease strikes a family, it is obviously a physical and emotional tragedy.
Yeah.
But the text emphasizes that it is simultaneously an economic disaster.
Enormous amounts of wealth are drained from ordinary households year after year.
Simply to cover medical expenses, treatments, and lost wages.
The ripple effect of that is terrifying when you scale it up. I mean, if every household is draining its resources just to stay at baseline health, what happens to the larger society?
The author scales that exact thought up to the national level.
He does.
He suggests that exorbitant medical spending, just to prop up a constantly sickly population, is a silent national emergency.
A drain that could literally bankrupt a country from the inside out.
Precisely. Therefore, finding a reliable method to avoid disease in the first place and a way to treat it without incurring massive financial debt isn't just a charming holistic health goal.
It is framed as an absolute personal and national imperative.
You cannot have a strong nation or a stable household if your physical body is constantly siphoning away your capital.
That reframes the entire practice for me. It is not just about feeling good.
It is about economic survival.
The text is positioning this hands-on therapy as the ultimate cost-free solution to that financial drain.
It is the ultimate life hack, really.
But that raises an immediate question about access. If this is the solution to medical debt, how does a normal person actually acquire this skill?
Right. Where do you buy it?
Exactly. The author introduces this core foundation called self-cultivation, and he uses a very specific metaphor to explain the process.
The castle wall.
Yes. He compares gathering this healing power to building a massive castle wall out of stones.
The castle wall metaphor is essential here because it dictates the pacing and the reality of the practice.
How so?
Well, if you are building an impenetrable defense, you don't just summon a giant boulder out of thin air and drop it into place.
No, you have to find the stone.
They have to locate the stones, carry them, and pile them meticulously, one single stone at a time, day after day.
And the text refers to these stones as merit.
Merit, which the practitioner accumulates within their heart-mind.
So what does accumulating merit actually look like in a practical sense? I mean, is it just a metaphor for being a good person?
Or is there a mechanical process to it?
Right.
It is highly mechanical in the context of this text. The author outlines a strict chain of cause and effect.
Okay, walk me through that.
It starts with the daily, repetitive act of maintaining a pure heart-mind.
Which means what, exactly?
The text suggests this is achieved through consistent morning and evening rituals, acts of reverence, quieting the mind, focusing inward.
So it isn't a vague suggestion.
No, it is a daily requirement. When you perform this daily act of purity laying down another stone, it naturally rectifies the practitioner's spirit.
It pulls the nervous system and the psyche out of chaos.
And into harmony.
And how does that psychological harmony translate into the physical ability to heal someone else?
This is where the text introduces a massive paradigm shift. It changes how we view skills entirely.
Okay.
A rectified, harmonious spirit is stated to naturally preserve the physical health of the body.
Right.
And once the body and mind are in a state of perfect preservation and harmony, an excess of vital energy is generated.
So the actual ability to lay your hands on a sick person and alleviate their illness is never described as a foreign, external technique.
No, you don't study and memorize it from scratch.
It is explicitly categorized as a natural byproduct.
Yes. It is a latent gift that emerges entirely on its own as a direct result of that daily stone piling.
That fundamentally changes the approach. You aren't going out into the world to capture some elusive magic.
Not at all.
The text is asserting that the practitioner is already sitting on a vast reservoir of potential.
And the daily cultivation is just the act of clearing away the debris so that reservoir can overflow.
For you listening, consider how revolutionary that perspective is.
It really is.
We are so used to the idea that if we want a new skill, we have to buy a course.
Or just a new supplement.
Or add something external to our lives.
Yeah.
But this text is aggressively linking your daily, internal, mental hygiene directly to a tangible physical output.
You cultivate a quiet mind, your body reaches homeostasis, your bank account stops bleeding medical expenses.
And as an inevitable bonus, your hands develop a therapeutic capacity.
It is a deeply democratic philosophy.
Because it's available to anyone.
Exactly. Because this power is framed as a natural biological byproduct of a harmonious state, the author insists it can be realized by absolutely anyone.
It is not a bloodline trait.
It is not reserved for the elite or the ordained.
However, there is a severe caveat here.
There is always a catch.
While it is available to everyone, it requires a staggering amount of dedicated, uncomfortable physical and mental discipline to awaken.
Which provides the perfect pivot into the physical reality of this practice.
Right. If the healing power is the byproduct, what is the actual labor? Where does a practitioner physically begin this process of piling stones?
The physical starting point is surprisingly stark. It begins with the body.
Specifically a posture known as seiza.
Which translates to quiet kneeling.
Let's break down the exact mechanics of seiza as described in the text, because it is not just casually taking a seat on the floor.
No, the instructions are incredibly rigid.
You must sit with both knees planted firmly on the floor.
The text does offer one small concession, right?
It does, and notes that you can raise one knee slightly, if absolutely necessary, to prevent compressing your lower abdomen. But the ideal is both knees down.
And the absolute non-negotiable key to this posture is the spine.
It must be perfectly rigidly straight. You cannot slouch. You cannot lean.
And importantly, you are instructed to completely close your eyes.
Why is that so important?
The instruction to close the eyes is the first defensive mechanism of the practice.
Defensive?
Yes. The author is acutely aware of human nature. He states clearly that keeping the eyes open serves as an open invitation for scattered worldly thoughts to enter the mind.
Because visual input triggers memory and anxiety.
Exactly. Shutting the eyes is the first physical barrier erected to protect the internal state.
But the physical posture of Seiza itself serves a much deeper purpose than just looking formal, doesn't it?
It does.
Because, honestly, it sounds incredibly uncomfortable. Sitting with a perfectly straight spine on your knees for extended periods sounds like a recipe for physical strain.
It is inherently uncomfortable, and that is precisely the point.
Really?
The text explains that Seiza is a deliberate technology used for restricting the physical energy of the body.
Okay, restricting it how?
By locking the limbs and torso into this strict, motionless, and demanding posture, you are bottlenecking the body's physical output.
And the author argues that restricting this physical energy forces a reciprocal stimulation of mental energy.
It traps your focus inside. When you are locked in this posture, you are forced into a kind of internal confrontation.
A confrontation with what, exactly?
Your own ego and your societal identity.
That makes sense.
The text explicitly instructs the practitioner that while in this locked posture, they must consciously discard all thoughts of their social class,
Their professional status.
their wealth, essentially their entire constructed concept of self.
The psychological instruction is profound. You are supposed to sit there and imagine that you have been entirely reborn in that exact moment.
Stripped of all earthly context.
It is an act of extreme physical restriction designed to trigger an absolute mental liberation.
That paints a very intense picture.
It does. You are kneeling, spine straight, eyes closed, actively dismantling your own ego.
And once you have established that baseline, you add the second physical component,
Which is the hand posture called gasso.
which simply means bringing the palms together.
But just like the kneeling, the text doesn't let you just lazily clap your hands together. It dictates the exact tension of the upper body.
Yes, the biomechanics are highly specific.
The shoulders must be actively dropped and relaxed. No shrugging or holding tension in the neck.
The elbows are lowered, pointing downward. The hands are brought together lightly, positioned directly in front of the chest.
And the text provides an absolutely fascinating analogy for the exact amount of physical pressure you should apply when pressing your hands together.
It is a beautiful image.
It says you should hold your palms as if you are gently pressing a fine silk handkerchief between them.
I want to linger on that for a second. Why a fine silk handkerchief?
It is a brilliant teaching tool because it perfectly encapsulates the concept of active equilibrium.
Think about the material properties of fine silk.
Right. It is incredibly smooth, lacking friction, but it is also delicate.
So if you press your hands together too fiercely, with too much muscular tension, you would crush and crease the silk. You ruin it.
Conversely, if you hold your hands too loosely, the lack of friction means the silk simply slips right through your fingers.
Then falls to the floor.
So it requires a state of constant micro-adjusted tension.
It is not a passive resting state at all.
You are engaging the exact minimum threshold of muscular effort required to maintain the posture, and absolutely zero excess.
Exactly. And that silk handkerchief analogy points to the much deeper physiological philosophy behind gasso.
Which is?
The author argues that the left and right sides of the human body are intricately, fundamentally connected, yet they are often out of balance.
He points to observable medical phenomena to prove this, right?
He does, noting how certain severe diseases, like paralysis or severe neuralgia, often heavily afflict just one side of the body.
To the author, this proves there is an internal division that must be reconciled.
So the act of bringing the left and right hands together isn't just a gesture of prayer or reverence.
It is an internal circuit completion.
Precisely. Gassho is presented as a physical and spiritual methodology for harmonizing the disparate halves of the body.
When you sit in the rigid stillness of Seiza and connect the left and right hemispheres of your physical form through Gassho, you are effectively creating a closed, harmonious loop.
And the text claims that this closed loop allows your inner reserves of vital power to steadily pool and gather,
preventing them from leaking out into the environment through scattered attention or physical flailing.
Speaking of physical flailing, this is where the text issues a massive, critical warning.
It is a warning that feels incredibly relevant even today.
For anyone listening who has watched documentaries about spiritual awakenings or deep trance states, you almost always see people physically reacting.
Right. They start shaking, their hands tremble, they sway aggressively back and forth.
Or they even end up flailing on the floor.
The author of this text addresses that exact phenomenon directly.
He does. And his stance on it is unequivocal. He warns that as a practitioner sits in gassho, if they allow uncontrolled tension to enter their hands or their nervous system, their hands might indeed begin to shake.
And that microtremor can quickly escalate into the entire body swaying.
And eventually, the person might completely lose physical control.
Now, in a lot of modern esoteric circles, that loss of control is celebrated.
Right. It is viewed as proof that the energy is working.
Or that a blockage is being violently cleared, or that some higher power is taking over. How does Tomita view this shaking?
He strictly and aggressively condemns it.
Really?
He recognizes the temptation to view this as a breakthrough. He notes that many people might experience this shaking and mistakenly assume they are having a profound spiritual awakening.
At the time the text was written, people often confused this with what was called kami possession.
Being overtaken by a divine spirit, or even an animal spirit possession.
The author shuts down all of those mystical interpretations.
What does he attribute the shaking to, if not spiritual awakening?
He categorizes it bluntly as an abnormal mental state.
He argues that it is a failure of discipline.
To his mind, allowing the body to flail fundamentally destroys the entire mechanical purpose of gasso.
Because the goal of the posture is deep, unbroken, still harmony.
The goal is the quiet pooling of resources in a closed loop. If you are shaking and flailing, you have broken the loop.
You are leaking energy wildly into the air.
The text is incredibly firm on this point. If you are shaking, you are not experiencing a higher state, you are simply doing the practice wrong.
That is such a refreshing, grounded perspective. It completely strips away the performative, theatrical aspect of spirituality.
It demands absolute, unglamorous discipline.
So let's look at the complete picture so far.
You are kneeling on the floor, spine perfectly straight, eyes closed, ego discarded.
Your hands are gently pressing that imaginary silk handkerchief.
And you are maintaining absolute physical stillness, refusing the urge to sway or shake.
What on earth is your brain supposed to be doing during all of this?
This brings us to the mental engine of the entire system. A method the text calls Jushinho.
Which means the method for purifying the heart-mind.
Because the author knows that merely restricting the physical body is not enough.
The human mind abhors a vacuum.
If you sit still in a dark room with your eyes closed, your mind will violently generate its own distractions.
To anchor the mind and prevent those scattered worldly thoughts from rushing back in, the practitioner requires a focal point.
The text instructs the practitioner to silently and reverently recite specific verses of poetry written by the Meiji Emperor.
The use of poetry here is fascinating. It is not a meaningless mantra or a random sound.
The purpose of using these specific verses is to illuminate the practitioner's own internal landscape with the pristine, elevated heart-mind expressed in the poetry itself.
The imagery in these verses is incredibly evocative, and we should explore the analogies the text provides.
We definitely should, because they serve as vital psychological tools for the practitioner.
The visual imagery is crucial because it gives the restless mind a massive, complex concept to chew on, preventing it from wandering to mundane anxieties.
One of the verses asks the practitioner to imagine expanding their spirit until it is as incredibly vast, clear, and unblemished as a great open green sky.
It is forcing a perspective shift.
If your mind is focused on the infinite expanse of a clear sky, the sharp pain in your knees from sitting in seiza suddenly feels very small and insignificant.
Another verse the text references uses the imagery of an ant.
It asks the practitioner to visualize the sheer, unreasonable perseverance of an ant climbing up a massive, towering structure into the sky.
Or an ant doggedly walking down a scorching hot road at high noon.
That specific analogy of the ant is brilliant for building resilience.
An ant possesses no concept of the total scale of the tower it is climbing.
Right.
It doesn't look up, become overwhelmed by the impossibility of the task, and quit.
It simply takes the next step, and the next.
By visualizing the ant on a scorching road, the practitioner is instructed to adopt that exact kind of undaunted, relentless, microscopic focus.
You endure the heat, you endure the discomfort, and you keep moving forward 1 millimeter at a time.
My absolute favorite analogy from this section uses the imagery of rain and stone.
Oh, yeah, that one is powerful.
The text reminds the practitioner to visualize a solid, dense stone that has been completely hollowed out by nothing but the soft, repetitive impact of raindrops.
The rain analogy speaks directly to the core philosophy of the castle wall and the daily piling of merit.
A single raindrop is soft, yielding, and completely powerless against a rock.
Yeah.
If you apply a raindrop once, nothing happens.
But the text is teaching a lesson about the immense, undeniable power of accumulation over time.
The constant, unending repetition of a soft force will eventually conquer the hardest material on Earth.
It is a psychological safeguard designed to force the practitioner to discard the thought that this process is too difficult.
It reassures them that consistent, soft, effort-like sitting quietly every day will eventually yield profound physical changes.
So the mind is engaged in these vast, sweeping visualizations of skies, ants, and hollowing stones. But where in the physical body is all this mental energy supposed to be anchored?
This brings us to a crucial anatomical concept in the text, the tanden.
For any listeners who have a background in martial arts, Qigong, or certain meditation traditions, the tanden is a very familiar concept.
The text locates it deep in the lower abdomen, roughly a couple of inches below the navel and situated slightly inward toward the spine.
The author is unequivocal about its importance. He states that this specific anatomical location is the absolute gravitational center of all self-cultivation.
It is described as the core pool, the physical crucible where this healing energy actually ignites and awakens.
The instruction is that no matter what your hands are doing or what verse your mind is reciting, your core awareness must ultimately remain anchored in the tanden.
But there's a massive contradiction in the text regarding this center that I want to unpack.
Yeah, let's get into that.
If the tanden is the most critical physiological center for this entire practice, logic would dictate that a practitioner should do everything in their power to physically build it up, right?
That is the logical assumption, yes.
Okay.
If a muscle is weak, you lift weights to make it strong.
Exactly. But the author explicitly and vehemently warns against trying to force the development of the tanden through artificial means.
He specifically calls out and advises against utilizing intense, forced, deep breathing exercises.
Or engaging in rigorous abdominal muscle workouts specifically designed to strengthen that lower belly area.
The text's rejection of forced breathing exercises is a fascinating divergence from many other traditions.
And the rationale behind it reveals the deepest operating principle of Tomita's entire philosophy.
The author insists that the development of the tanden must be entirely rooted in nature.
What does he mean by rooted in nature in this context? Why is a breathing exercise considered unnatural?
Well, if you engage in a forced, intense breathing routine to pump up your lower abdomen, it might feel incredibly powerful in the moment.
It might seem like you were making rapid progress.
But the author argues that because the effort is forced and artificial, it inherently comes with physiological and psychological drawbacks.
You are introducing strain into a system that is supposed to be seeking harmony.
More importantly, you cannot maintain a fierce, intense breathing pattern 24 hours a day.
You would pass out, or you would be utterly exhausted.
Precisely. The author's goal is not for the practitioner to enter a temporary, heightened state for 30 minutes during a workout.
The true awakened state of the tanden must be something that is integrated seamlessly into your baseline existence.
It has to become a state that you maintain naturally, effortlessly throughout your entire day, whether you are sleeping, eating, working, or healing.
It is about permanently altering your default state of being, not just adding a strenuous routine to your schedule.
It is the difference between holding your breath to float momentarily versus actually learning how to swim naturally.
Okay, so we have established the foundational philosophy.
We understand the physical posture of Seiza and Gasho.
We understand the mental imagery of the hollowing stone.
And we know the focus is quietly resting in the natural tanden. Now we transition into the actual application.
How does a normal person take all of these disparate elements and turn the engine on?
This is where the text shifts from philosophical groundwork into a highly practical, surprisingly rigorous instruction manual.
The author refers to this specific process as Hatsureho, which translates to the method for awakening the healing power.
For you listening, if you have ever craved a literal step-by-step training manual from a historical text, this is exactly what you have been waiting for.
The author doesn't just say, sit until it happens.
Yeah.
He lays out a highly specific, escalating 5-day training boot camp.
And I want us to really take our time walking through this day by day, because the physiological progression is incredible.
Let's start with day 1.
The structure of this 5-day plan is essentially a masterclass in progressive neurological adaptation.
It is designed to simultaneously acclimate the physical body to the severe discomfort of the kneeling posture, while aggressively training the nervous system to recognize and isolate incredibly subtle internal sensations.
So on day 1, the instructions are seemingly simple. The practitioner's goal is to sit in the seiza posture, with hands in gasho for roughly 30 minutes.
The text suggests beginning by taking a few deep, purifying breaths to settle the mind.
Then you sit. And your entire objective for that first half hour is to pay such close microscopic attention to your hands that you begin to sense a very specific phenomenon the text calls rionetsu.
Renetsu translates to a specific internal heat radiating from the palms of the hands.
Now, 30 minutes of kneeling completely motionless on the floor is no small feat for a beginner,
The pain in the knees and ankles will become acute very quickly.
which makes the search for rionetsu almost a psychological survival tactic, doesn't it?
That is the psychological brilliance of the design. The pain in the legs is a massive, screaming physical signal.
By demanding that the practitioner focus entirely on detecting a microscopic, subtle shift in the temperature of their palms, the author is forcing the brain to reallocate its processing power.
You are actively distracting your own nervous system from the pain in your lower body by hunting for a whisper of heat in your upper body.
You survived day 1, and hopefully you felt a slight warming in your hands. This brings us to day 2.
The author immediately increases the duration. You are now expected to maintain the posture for 30 to 40 minutes.
You recite your verses, you recall the feeling of the heat from the day before, and you sit in stillness.
The text states that the objective for day 2 is to notice the heat increasing, but more importantly, to observe the emergence of a brand new sensation.
As the nervous system adapts to the posture and the sustained focus, the physiological feedback loop intensifies.
The text introduces a new term here, reiba, which translates to waves.
The author describes this sensation very specifically. He says it feels like the tingling you experience when a limb has fallen asleep.
It is a sort of internal static electricity, a buzzing vibration in the tissues of the hand.
From a modern physiological standpoint, what we are likely seeing here is the result of hypersensitization.
The practitioners holding their hands in a sustained, elevated posture with microtension while breathing deeply and focusing intensely.
They are literally training their brain to consciously register the minute ambient circulatory and neurological shifts that are constantly happening in their hands.
Shifts that we normally tune out as background noise. The reiba, the tingling waves, is the sensation of the practitioner's own nervous system coming online to their conscious awareness.
The practitioner is basically turning the volume dial of their own sensory perception all the way up.
Which prepares them for day 3, where the boot camp takes a massive, slightly bizarre leap.
On day 3, you are sitting for a solid 40 minutes. The text notes that because you have practiced for 2 days, the mind-body harmony is solidifying, meaning the heat and the tingling will manifest much faster.
But the specific, new exercise for day 3 requires you to break the physical loop of gasso.
Yes. The instruction is to slowly pull your hands apart, separating the palms by roughly 6 to 9 centimeters.
And the text makes a massive claim here.
Yeah.
It states that when you hold your hands slightly apart after building up this state, you'll feel a distinct, undeniable magnetic pull between your palms.
The author claims it will physically feel as though an invisible force is actively drawing your hands back together.
This is a profound escalation in the training methodology. Think about the progression.
Days 1 and 2 are entirely internal. You are feeling your own heat and your own tingling inside your own skin.
Day 3 moves the sensation from the internal environment into the external space between the hands. It creates a physical interaction with the empty air.
Why is that shift from internal to external so important for the practitioner's development?
Because it provides the practitioner with tangible, objective feedback. When you are just feeling heat, a skeptical mind can easily dismiss it, thinking, I'm just holding my hands together, of course they are warm.
But when you physically feel a magnetic resistance or a pulling sensation in the empty space between your hands, it shatters that skepticism.
It provides undeniable bodily proof that a real energetic mechanism has been engaged.
This physical proof is exactly the encouragement the practitioner needs to endure the escalating demands of the boot camp.
And they absolutely need that encouragement because day 4 is brutal.
The duration is pushed to 40 or 50 minutes of continuous sitting.
And on day 4, the practitioner is introduced to an entirely new hand posture. You are no longer pressing your palms together in front of your chest.
Instead, you are instructed to tightly interlock your fingers. You then lower your hands and place them directly beneath your navel, resting them right over the tendon.
This posture represents a consolidation phase. You have generated the energy, and now you are physically locking the circuit directly over the source pool to maximize the accumulation.
You sit in this interlocked posture for a long time, allowing the energy to pool. Then, the text instructs you to bring your hands back up and separate them.
The exercise for day 4 is to attempt to actively emit power from your right hand and direct it across the empty space into your left palm.
This step marks the critical transition from passive generation to active conscious control.
The sensation you are trying to produce is fascinating. The text says it should feel like a very narrow, highly concentrated, cool breeze hitting a specific spot on your left hand.
The author says that if you point your right middle finger like a gun at your left palm, you should be able to feel that cool breeze hit the exact millimeter on your left hand that you are aiming at.
The practitioner is learning to focus the emission, to tighten the beam.
Up until this point, the energy has been radiating diffusely like heat off a radiator. On day 4, they are learning to focus it like a laser pointer.
This pinpoint control is absolutely essential because, as we will see in the diagnostic sections, diseases are often hiding in highly localized spots that require concentrated treatment.
Which brings us to the climax of the boot camp, day 5, the ultimate practical exam.
The endurance required here is extreme. The practitioner is now expected to sit in perfectly still seiza for a full hour.
The first 20 minutes are spent in standard gassho. The next 20 minutes are spent with the hands interlocked below the navel.
That is 40 minutes of agonizing physical discipline, followed by the actual test of their new capability.
The final 20 minutes are the practical exam. The practitioner rests their left hand quietly on their lap, maintaining their internal state.
They then take their right hand and physically place it on another human being.
The text specifies finding someone who has acutely stiff shoulders. The practitioner rests their right hand on the stiff shoulder for about 15 minutes.
The test is a study in physical contrast. The practitioner must actively compare the internal sensation in their right hand, which is touching the patient, against the sensation in their left hand, which is resting in the neutral space of their lap.
The author states what the results should be. The right hand touching the shoulder should begin to tingle intensely, as if it has fallen deeply asleep.
And crucially, the person receiving the touch should report that their stiff shoulder feels significantly lighter and relieved of tension.
If we look at the entire arc of this 5-day process, it is a staggering progression.
Over the course of just 5 days, the text attempts to guide an ordinary, untrained person through a complete physical and neurological overhaul.
They move from struggling to sit still on the floor to learning how to internally gather energy.
How to externally direct it as a focused breeze.
And finally, how to successfully interface with another human being's physiology to alleviate physical tension.
It requires an extraordinary, almost superhuman level of patience and bodily awareness.
It is a phenomenal mental and physical achievement. So, let us assume for a moment that you, the listener, have survived this boot camp.
You can reliably generate the heat, you can feel the tingling waves.
You can direct the cool breeze, and you pass the shoulder test. You are officially ready to heal people.
But this raises an enormous logistical problem.
If a patient comes to you and says, "I feel incredibly sick," how do you actually know where the problem is?
How do you find the specific target you were supposed to be aiming at?
This is where the text introduces arguably the most fascinating and complex concept in the entire manual.
It is a phenomenon the author calls byokan, which translates directly to the sensation of disease.
This is the practitioner's diagnostic radar system.
The text describes it quite literally like a biological radar.
How does this mechanism actually work? How does a hand sense a disease?
The author provides a very logical, physics-based explanation for how byokan operates. He argues that a practitioner who is rigorously engaged in this daily self-cultivation has fundamentally altered their baseline physiology.
Their hands and their nervous system now represent a state of perfect, unblocked health.
They are the control group in the experiment.
Precisely. Now, the text explains that illness in a patient is fundamentally a blockage, a stagnation in circulation or vital energy.
When the perfectly healthy, freely flowing energy from the practitioner's hands comes into close physical contact with the dense, blocked energy of a diseased body, a stark contrast is formed.
A reaction occurs at the boundary line between health and disease.
That is like dropping an ice cube into a glass of hot water. The reaction is immediate and violently obvious.
Exactly. And the practitioner's highly sensitized nervous system registers this subtle energetic reaction as a very loud, distinct physical sensation inside their own hands.
That resulting sensation, the echo of the disease bouncing back into the practitioner's palm, is Byoken.
And the text is incredibly detailed about what this actually feels like. It is not just a vague, singular feeling.
The author catalogs a wide variety of specific sensations, and each one means something different.
For instance, a practitioner might feel their hand being physically, magnetically drawn toward a specific hidden spot on the patient's body.
They might feel that intense static electricity sleepiness in their palm.
The intensity of the byoken directly correlates to the severity and nature of the disease.
For highly acute sudden diseases, the sensation can be violent. The text mentions that the practitioner might experience a heavy, agonizing, throbbing pain manifesting in their own hand.
The author even mentions extreme, almost terrifying sensory illusions.
He writes that for certain severe blockages, it might feel as though the practitioner has plunged their hand directly into a pot of boiling water.
Or, conversely, it might feel as though the palm of their hand is being rhythmically, aggressively poked by a dense bundle of sharp needles.
This section demands an incredibly high level of sensory literacy from the practitioner. They cannot just feel a sensation and panic.
They have to instantly translate these bizarre, often painful physical illusions into actionable diagnostic data.
A weak, diffused tingling might indicate a chronic, long-standing illness that has depleted the body.
But an unbearable hot throbbing might indicate a sudden, dangerous, acute infection.
The practitioner's hands are no longer just tools for pushing energy. They are functioning as real-time, highly calibrated biosensors.
But the text doesn't stop at just identifying the disease. It introduces a concept regarding the healing process itself that I found absolutely mind-bending.
It is a phenomena the author terms the reversal of pathogenesis.
This is a profound and highly counterintuitive observation about the true nature of cellular healing.
We are so conditioned by modern medicine to expect a linear path to recovery.
You have a headache, you take a pill, the headache slowly fades away over 30 minutes, and you are cured.
The author states that when using this therapy to treat deeply entrenched chronic diseases, the healing process does not follow that gentle fading path.
Instead, the process works in terrifying reverse. A chronic, low-level disease will temporarily and violently transform into a highly acute, agonizing disease right before it is finally cured.
It requires a massive paradigm shift from the patient.
The author uses a very specific clinical example to illustrate this. He discusses treating patients suffering from severe nerve pain, like chronic neuralgia.
He notes that for the first few days or even weeks of continuous hands-on treatment, the patient might report feeling absolutely nothing.
No improvement, no pain, just neutrality.
Which would be incredibly discouraging for the patient.
It would. But the text states that as the practitioner relentlessly continues to pump vital energy into the blockage day after day, a breaking point is reached.
Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, the patient will begin to experience agonizing, peak, throbbing pain at the site of the disease.
The pain will escalate to such an outrageous, unbearable level that the patient will often beg the practitioner to stop the treatment immediately.
The text provides a literal quote for this scenario, noting that the patient will cry out, "Could you please stop treatment for a little bit?" Because the physical agony is so overwhelming.
And the author points out how physiologically bizarre this reaction is.
He notes that if you apply the exact same energy to a healthy part of the body, it feels soothing or neutral. It only causes pain at the site of the blockage.
But the critical instruction to the practitioner is that they must not stop.
This outrageous, screaming pain is the climax of the disease. It is the death throes of the illness.
The energy is basically flushing the disease out of hiding, forcing it to the surface in a massive, painful confrontation.
Exactly. The text claims that once the patient endures that temporary peak of extreme pain, the blockage breaks.
The pain subsides entirely, and the disease is permanently, completely healed.
It makes complete sense if you use a mechanical analogy.
If you have an old, rusty, calcified pipe in your house, and you suddenly blast a massive amount of high-pressure water through it to clear it out,
The pipe is going to shudder, groan, and rattle violently right before the blockage blows out.
it gets incredibly loud and messy right before it gets clean.
And speaking of things hiding beneath the surface, this expert diagnostic radar via Byoken leads the author to establish another bizarre, rigid rule of diagnosis.
He states emphatically that the actual root cause of a disease is very often located nowhere near the place where the patient is complaining of pain.
This is a crucial, fundamental pivot away from how we typically approach bodily ailments.
In standard symptomatic medicine, if a patient's eye hurts, the doctor examines the eye.
But the author argues that the pain is merely the alarm bell. It is rarely the fire itself.
He provides a phenomenal clinical anecdote from his own practice to prove this point.
He writes about treating a young child who was suffering from a severe, highly visible eye condition.
The child's eyes were inflamed, bloodshot, and producing heavy discharge. Common sense dictates you put your hands over the child's eyes to heal them.
And the author admits that if a practitioner follows common sense and only treats the eyes, the treatment will be totally ineffective, and the painful disease will drag on for days without resolution.
Because common sense is an intellectual assumption, and this practice relies entirely on physical feedback.
When the author used his hands to scan the child's entire body, his Bioken radar alerted him to something impossible.
He found a massive, overwhelmingly strong sensation of disease emanating from the child's chest.
But the child had absolutely zero symptoms in the chest. No cough, no pain, nothing.
To a conventional doctor, treating the chest for an eye infection is absurd.
But the author's strict diagnostic thesis is that the root of the disease was hiding silently in the chest and simply manifesting its symptom in the eyes.
So what did he do?
He followed the radar blindly. He treated only the chest. He completely ignored the inflamed, painful eyes.
And the text claims that by directing the healing energy exclusively to the hidden root in the chest, the eye disease cleared up incredibly rapidly.
That is a staggering lesson for the practitioner. It demands absolute, unwavering trust in physical intuition over intellectual assumption.
You have to learn to trust the bizarre sensations in your own hands infinitely more than the patient's verbal complaints.
And more than traditional medical logic.
Where the Bioken sensation is strongest, that is the undeniable root, and that is the only place the natural healing ability must be directed.
And the text pushes the boundaries of this sensitivity even further. He claims this radar can be developed to truly astonishing, almost unbelievable levels of refinement.
Let's talk about the sliding doors analogy, because this is where the text starts testing the limits of what a modern reader considers physically possible.
The author explains that this emitted vital energy is not constrained by standard physical barriers.
He says that if an experienced practitioner is actively emitting that concentrated, cool breeze of energy, and a receiver is holding their hand up to catch it,
the transmission works perfectly, even if they cannot see each other.
he specifically says that the receiver will feel the breeze hit their palm even if they are standing meters apart, with closed, solid sliding doors completely blocking their line of sight.
The implication is massive. It suggests that this energetic phenomenon operates on a frequency that passes harmlessly through solid matter.
Much like radio waves or certain types of radiation.
And if passing through walls isn't wild enough, the text pushes it completely into the realm of the extraordinary with the concept of distance diagnosis.
The author claims that a truly masterful, experienced practitioner does not even need the physical body of the sick person in the room to locate the disease.
Yes, the author asserts that a practitioner can take a physical photograph of a sick patient,
Scan their highly sensitized hand over the surface of the paper photograph.
and actually feel the byokan, the throbbing, the heat, the needles emanating from the specific part of the photograph that corresponds to the sick organ in the real person's body.
To be able to read the energetic, biological blockage of a living human being encoded into the emulsion of a piece of paper, it genuinely pushes the boundaries of our accepted reality.
But for the sake of our roadmap, let us bring it back into the physical treatment room.
Let's assume you have used your radar. You scanned the body, you felt the needles, and you successfully located the hidden root of the disease.
The diagnosis is complete. How do you actually administer the cure?
This brings us to section 6 of the text, the mechanics of the hands, or reishu.
The author is incredibly practical here. He recognizes that discovering the disease is only half the battle.
He uses a very grounding, somber analogy to describe the brutal reality of actual treatment.
He compares the process of treating a deeply entrenched chronic disease to the logistics of supplying an army on a long-term battlefield.
Let's unpack that battlefield analogy. Who is fighting whom?
The text explains that the human body possesses a fierce, inherent natural healing ability.
This is the body's internal army, and it naturally and constantly resists and attacks disease.
However, when an illness is chronic, meaning it has been entrenched in the body for months or years, the body's natural reserves have been utterly depleted.
The internal army is starved and exhausted.
If the internal army is exhausted, why can't the practitioner just act as a massive reinforcement?
Why can't the practitioner just blast the disease with a huge wave of external energy and obliterate it in one session?
Because the sick person's body is the battlefield, and it is fragile.
The text argues that a weakened, depleted body simply lacks the capacity to safely absorb and process a massive, overwhelming influx of energy all at once.
If you tried to overrun the disease with a single massive blow, you would likely shatter the patient's remaining stability.
It is physically impossible to cure a chronic illness in one massive push.
So what is the tactical approach?
The treatment demands a slow, methodical, daily replenishment. The practitioner's role is not to be the hero who kills the disease.
The practitioner's role is to act as the supply line.
They must consistently, patiently supply fresh vital energy to the site of the disease.
Slowly rebuilding and feeding the patient's own natural defenses day after day.
It is exactly like continuously sending fresh troops, rations, and ammunition to a long, drawn-out siege.
Healing is an exercise in grinding endurance, not a flashy quick fix.
Now, this concept of acting as a constant supply line to a sick, diseased battlefield raises a very common, very visceral fear.
I think anyone listening would immediately wonder about this.
If you are a practitioner and you are physically touching deeply sick people every single day,
And your hands are acting as an open, highly sensitive radar, intimately connecting with their diseased energy.
don't you inevitably absorb their bad energy? Will the practitioner eventually become sick from soaking up all this illness?
The author is absolutely violently adamant in his response to this fear. No.
He spends a significant portion of the text debunking this exact anxiety because he knows it would prevent people from practicing.
He clarifies the exact physics of the energetic interaction to put the reader at ease.
How does he explain the physics of it? Why is it safe?
He describes the interaction between practitioner and patient as a strict physical one-way street.
The practitioner, who has cultivated an excess of pure vital energy, is exclusively an emitter.
The sick, depleted patient is exclusively an absorber.
The physics dictate that energy always flows from a state of high concentration to a state of low concentration.
Much like water flowing downhill. The disease cannot swim upstream against the current of the practitioner's emitted power.
The text provides a great, highly relatable example to illustrate this one-way flow. It asks the reader to imagine two children sleeping in the same bed.
One child is robust, strong, and perfectly healthy.
The other child is weak, depleted, and suffering from a high fever caused by the measles.
The author notes that if a practitioner applies a massive dose of vital energy to both children simultaneously, the results are entirely different.
The healthy child, whose internal reservoir is already full, simply does not absorb the energy.
Their body temperature remains completely unchanged. They take nothing because they need nothing.
But the weak child, the one with the measles, is essentially an empty sponge.
Exactly. The sick child's depleted body absorbs the emitted energy eagerly and rapidly.
As a result, their high fever breaks, their temperature normalizes, and they begin to recover.
The fundamental law of this therapy is that the sick body takes exactly what it needs, and the healthy body is entirely unaffected by the proximity to the disease.
However, the author is honest enough to concede that a practitioner might sometimes feel physically drained or fatigued after providing a particularly intense treatment.
But he is very careful to categorize this fatigue correctly.
He clarifies that this fatigue is absolutely not because the practitioner absorbed the patient's disease.
He coins a specific term for this feeling: being hit by ray.
What does being hit by ray actually mean?
It is essentially an internal physiological shock.
When a novice practitioner suddenly acts as a conduit, running a massive volume of highly concentrated vital energy through their own nervous system to treat a patient, their body is surprised by the sheer voltage.
The fatigue is just the physical exhaustion of acting as a high-capacity wire.
The author assures the reader that this shock only happens the first few times they treat a serious illness, as their body adapts to the increased flow.
And it causes absolutely zero bodily harm or lasting damage.
Okay, so the practitioner is safe, the supply line is established. Now we need to look at the actual physical tools the practitioner uses to deliver the supply.
The text outlines 5 highly specific hand configurations, which it collectively calls ratio.
I love this section because it reads like a mechanic detailing the specific wrenches in his toolbox. Every tool has a highly specific, distinct purpose.
The first technique in the toolkit is the most basic, emitting power from the entire flat, open palm.
This is your broad spectrum approach. The text notes that using the whole palm is primarily utilized during the initial diagnostic phase when you are rapidly scanning the entire body for the byoken.
It is also used for treating very large, generalized areas of mild discomfort where pinpoint accuracy isn't required.
The second technique is the absolute opposite extreme. The practitioner uses just the very tip of the middle finger, pointing it directly at the patient.
The text describes this almost like a surgical laser beam. You use the tip of the middle finger when the Byogyur has located an incredibly tiny, deep, and highly concentrated root of a disease that requires maximum penetrating focal pressure.
The third technique utilizes the bottom joint of the middle finger, right where the finger physically connects to the palm of the hand.
The author describes this as an excellent, versatile middle ground. Because of the anatomy of the hand, it provides a solid, slightly raised point of contact that is useful for both detailed diagnosis and treating fairly large areas with a bit more intensity than the flat palm.
The fourth technique is what we could call the standard workhorse of the entire system. It involves using the middle joint of the middle finger.
The author explicitly states that this is the technique you will use for the vast majority of everyday, normal treatments.
It is particularly effective for tracing lines of pain. For example, if a patient is suffering from severe nerve pain shooting down an arm or a leg.
The practitioner uses this middle joint to slowly trace and treat the entire length of the afflicted nerve pathway.
And finally, the fifth technique returns to holding the hand completely open and flat, but the text notes it is specifically calibrated for treating softer, more vulnerable, and broader anatomical areas.
Right, you wouldn't want to use a harsh laser beam fingertip on someone's throat.
The open, flat hand is explicitly recommended for treating the soft tissue of the abdomen, the delicate structures of the neck, or swollen tonsils. But here is the critical takeaway from this section. Regardless of whether you are using the broad sweep of the whole palm or the hyper-focused tip of middle finger, there is one ultimate, unbreakable physical rule for how you must position your body during treatment.
The text calls this the fundamental truth of laying hands in this therapy.
And to understand it, we have to return to the core concept we discussed earlier, the tandem.
The author calls this the rule of absolute alignment. He states that for the treatment to have any efficacy whatsoever, there must always be a perfect, unbroken, straight line, a central axis of geometry connecting three highly specific points in space.
The geometry is non-negotiable. Point A is the exact center of the practitioner's emitting palm.
Point B is the exact hidden root of the disease inside the patient's body.
And point C is the center of the practitioner's own heart-mind, which is anchored physically in their tandem in the lower abdomen.
Palm, disease, tandem. If those 3 points are not perfectly physically lined up on a single axis, the text says the treatment will be completely ineffective. It provides a great visual analogy. It is exactly like trying to shine the beam of a flashlight through a tiny keyhole in a door.
If your angle is off by even a fraction of an inch, the light just bounces uselessly off the solid wood of the door.
You have to line up your core, your emitting hand, and the target perfectly to get the energy through the keyhole.
This rule of alignment is profoundly demanding. It forces the practitioner to be entirely, relentlessly physically present during the entirety of the treatment.
You cannot be slouching in your chair. You cannot be looking out the window or distracted by a conversation.
Your entire physical, skeletal structure and your complete mental focus must be entirely dedicated to maintaining that perfect geometry of transmission.
It transforms the act of healing from a casual gesture into a state of intense, hyper-focused physical meditation.
Which brings us perfectly to the final section of our deep dive. We have covered the economics, the physical training, the mental discipline, the diagnosis, and the mechanics.
Now we must address the ethics. How is a human being supposed to wield this kind of power responsibly?
Section 7 of the text is dedicated entirely to this question. The author lays out 5 strict, non-negotiable ethical rules that every practitioner must follow.
And I find this section to be the most grounding part of the entire manual.
It truly is. Honestly, reading these rules is quite a humbling experience. If you think about it, after reading pages and pages of a manual detailing how you can emit visible energy, diagnose hidden illnesses through solid sliding doors, and cure chronic diseases with your bare hands,
You would completely expect the author to possess a massive, uncontrollable ego.
you would expect him to declare himself a living god. But these 5 rules are incredibly modest, grounded, and deeply respectful of society. Let's unpack them one by one.
Rule 1 sets the tone immediately. Cooperate with medical doctors.
This is huge. The author absolutely does not position his therapy as an antagonistic alternative that is designed to destroy or replace modern scientific medicine.
He doesn't tell patients to throw away their pills or ignore their physicians.
Instead, he strongly advocates for an integrative approach. He insists that this therapy should be used directly alongside conventional medical treatments.
He provides specific examples to clarify this stance. He states that for severe, life-threatening infectious diseases like smallpox, typhoid, or dysentery, the patient must absolutely utilize modern vaccines and scientific medicines.
However, the practitioner applies the hands-on therapy concurrently with the medical treatment.
The goal isn't to replace the medicine, but to amplify the body's resilience.
The text argues that the hands-on therapy will speed up the patient's natural recovery process so significantly that the doctor will be able to gradually wean the patient off the harsh medicines much faster than would normally be possible,
It is a cooperative, supportive role, not a combative one.
which leads seamlessly into the profound humility demanded by Rule 2. The practitioner does not cure the disease.
This rule is an absolute ego killer.
The text explicitly warns the practitioner that even if they successfully treat and heal a patient that a team of highly specialized modern doctors had completely given up on,
Even if they perform what looks like a miracle.
the practitioner has absolutely zero right to be boastful or arrogant about it.
Why? Because according to the mechanics we discussed earlier, the practitioner didn't actually cure anything.
Exactly. The practitioner is instructed to view themselves merely as a conduit, a piece of biological machinery.
They are just acting as a battery jumper cable, passively supplying vital energy.
It is the sick person's own body, their own original, innate, natural healing ability that wakes up and does the actual hard work of destroying the disease and repairing the tissue.
The author strips the mystique away completely. He states literally that a body getting better is just a fundamental function of human nature.
It is a biological mechanism working as intended.
Therefore, healing someone is neither something to be falsely modest or ashamed of, nor is it something to be overly proud of.
It is simply nature taking its course with a little extra fuel.
It completely removes the savior complex from the practitioner's mindset. You are a supply line, not a savior.
Rule 3 scales this immense humility down from the clinic directly into the personal domestic life of the practitioner. Seek harmony at home first.
This rule is a fascinating glimpse into the sociological and cultural values of the author's era. It dictates that a practitioner's first and absolute priority must be their own household.
I deeply appreciate the pragmatism of this rule.
The text explicitly warns newly trained practitioners not to go running out enthusiastically into the streets, bragging about their new healing powers and try to cure random strangers in society.
The author bluntly points out a harsh social truth. If your own household is constantly sick, disorganized, and out of harmony, society at large will look at you and rightly refuse to recognize or respect your attempts to heal others.
You will look like a hypocrite.
It is the ultimate expression of the modern concept physician, heal thyself, or the airline instruction to put your own oxygen mask on before assisting others.
The text mandates a strict order of operations. You must rigorously treat and eradicate the diseases of your own immediate family first.
Once your household is a beacon of health and harmony, you extend your practice to your extended relatives and close friends.
Only after you have secured your immediate communal network do you have the moral authority to present yourself as a healing model for broader society.
It proves that this practice is meant to be an anchor for the community, not a vehicle for personal fame. And Rule 4 dictates the specific environment and internal mindset required whenever the practice is actually performed.
Engage in healing as a sacred endeavor.
This rule is designed to protect the dignity of both the therapy and the patient.
The text is extremely strict on this point. No party tricks.
You cannot utilize this ability carelessly to show off to your friends.
You cannot do it for a quick laugh.
Yeah.
And the author explicitly forbids performing this therapy at a drinking establishment or a loud party.
The reasoning is rooted in deep empathy.
The author reminds the practitioner that when you are called to use this therapy, you are almost always dealing with sick people who are in severe pain, frightened, and often in dire, life-altering straits.
The act of laying hands on a suffering human being requires an atmosphere of passionate sincerity, profound respect, and quiet human virtue.
Treating it casually is a violation of the sacred trust the patient is placing in you.
It demands that the practitioner rise to the gravity of the moment. Finally, Rule 5 brings the entire philosophical framework full circle, returning us directly to the diagnostic radar we discussed earlier.
Identify the root, not the label.
This final rule serves to completely free the practitioner from the immense burden of needing to be a walking medical encyclopedia.
The author states very clearly that as a practitioner of Ray therapy, you do not need to memorize the complex, Latin-based medical names of thousands of diseases.
You don't need to know the academic difference between a diagnosis of gastreptosis, gastric catarrh, or stomach cancer.
Because to this specific methodology, those complex academic names are ultimately just human-made labels applied to a list of symptoms.
Modern medicine relies heavily on categorizing and treating based on those specific labels.
But this therapy bypasses the intellect entirely.
It relies strictly and exclusively on the byoken, the physical sensation in the hands.
The rule states that your only job, your only responsibility, is to physically scan the body, locate the undeniable energetic root of the blockage, and relentlessly supply vital energy until that blockage clears and the patient's pain stops.
The academic name of the disease is completely irrelevant to the actual physical mechanics of clearing it.
It radically simplifies the entire therapeutic process.
It demands that the practitioner return their focus strictly to the raw, energetic reality of the human body lying in front of them, rather than getting lost in the weeds of academic terminology and theoretical diagnoses.
And that, incredibly, covers the entirety of our deeply detailed roadmap through Chapter 2 of this remarkable source material.
We have genuinely covered an immense amount of conceptual and practical ground today.
We really have. Just to recap the sheer scope of this journey for you listening.
We started by looking at how the text inextricably links the brutal economic necessity of avoiding medical debt to the quiet, daily practice of personal self-cultivation.
We walked step by step through the grueling physical discipline of kneeling in seiza, harmonizing the mind with poetry, and piling those stones of merit.
We explored the intense 5-day physiological boot camp where practitioners literally train their nervous systems to feel the heat and the magnetic, tingling waves of healing power.
We decoded the fascinating, counterintuitive diagnostic radar of Byoken, where the hands can sense hidden blockages and trigger the painful reversal of pathogenesis.
And finally, we grounded all of that immense power in 5 strict rules of ethical humility: cooperating with science, healing the family first, and entirely leaving the ego at the door.
It is a truly remarkable historical text because it systematically, aggressively demystifies a subject that is almost always shrouded in vague, occult language.
It takes the concept of extraordinary healing and frames it simply as the inevitable, mechanical result of disciplined, dedicated, natural practice.
And for you listening, as you go about the rest of your day, whether you fundamentally believe in the physical, literal reality of this emitted vital energy or not, I think this text offers a profound, highly applicable masterclass in something we desperately need in the modern world.
It is a masterclass in extreme embodied mindfulness.
It demonstrates the sheer, undeniable power of physical posture, of deliberately sitting down, straightening your spine, and closing your eyes to the relentless chaos and distraction of the world around you.
And it highlights the incredibly deep, undeniable physiological connection between our daily baseline mental state and our long-term physical and economic health.
But before we officially sign off and let you get back to your day, we want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over.
The entire foundation of this text operates on one core, staggering premise: that a state of perfect, unblocked human health can literally act as a highly sensitive diagnostic radar.
It suggests that a truly harmonious, quiet body can physically detect the hidden illnesses and blockages in others simply through close physical proximity.
Merely by registering the stark contrast between health and disease.
If we assume for a moment that our human nervous systems are truly capable of sensing these incredibly subtle, silent pains in another person's body just by being near them,
What does that imply about how profoundly and biologically interconnected we actually are as a species?
could it be possible that our baseline state of physical presence, when we are truly quiet, perfectly aligned, and deeply healthy, is naturally evolved to be an active tool for deep, unspoken empathy and mutual healing?
And if so, is that an innate, fundamental human capacity that our loud, hyper-distracted, and physically isolated modern society has simply forgotten how to use?
That is a massive concept to think about the next time you find yourself sitting quietly in a room with another person.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this deep dive today. We absolutely love unpacking these complex historical concepts with you. Until next time, keep digging deep. Goodbye.